and Charlotte Mason talk about spreading the feast and mother culture. Welcome to the diner, where we serve up culture from a short order kitchen. Step up to the counter and let us serve you a slice of mental pie. Not a feast, just a snack. A deep thought to chew on from a big, meaty book. It'll go good with a cup of coffee. Then you get your refreshed self back to the fray with a few new beautiful thoughts to think. It's Season 1, and the Blue Plate Special is Dr. Timothy Patitsas, The Ethics of Beauty. You know, that huge, intimidating popular theology book that you wish you had time to read? Well, have a couple bites of it with us and join the conversation.
Welcome to the diner. I'm Lisa Rose, and I'm here with my co-author, Laura E. Wolfe, and we are the authors of Patterns for Life, and we are here today discussing The Ethics of Beauty by Dr. Timothy Patitsas. And last week, we talked a little bit about why this book and what we're going to do with the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about who the book is for. And Dr. Patitsas lays it out in the introduction to his book. He talks about it being for academics, obviously, because usually it is academics who are talking about ethics. Academics usually define ethics as the rational investigation of morality, right? Let's use our minds to think about what morality is, what it does, how it affects people, that kind of thing. And we're just thinking about why people do the things that they do, good or bad, why they do moral things, why they do immoral things, what motivates them.
And then he turns it on his head, doesn't he?
Uh-huh. And he says that beauty usually doesn't even have a place in academic ethics. Beauty is left out entirely. And we always talk about the transcendentals, right? Truth, goodness, and beauty. And truth usually comes first. Truth is like paramount. But he's saying, where is beauty? Where's the place for beauty within that paradigm?
Well, I'll tell you, I took a philosophy class. I was a philosophy minor in college. I'm a little bit of a nerd. And one of my classes was moral philosophy. And I can tell you right now, beauty never came into it once.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of ethics comes back to utilitarianism, which is the opposite of beauty. It's truly horrible to behold the implications of utilitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
So reading that we're going to be talking about ethics from the perspective of beauty already is a breath of relief, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Even if we're not academics.
Yeah. Because everybody can appreciate beauty. And mm-hmm. we all have a sense, and we're all able to recognize what is beautiful. But the other audience that he talks about is Christian theologians. First of all, we have to define a theologian.
Right.
So for we who are Orthodox, we say a theologian is one who prays. Hopefully that means that's all
mm-hmm.
of us, right? We all want to become people
right.
who pray, even if we don't right now.
Right. So obviously he's talking to not just people who are in seminary already at this point.
Right.
Because a theologian isn't just somebody who's in a monastery mm-hmm. or a seminary. I mean, we are all called to pray unceasingly. And as Orthodox Christians, we take this very seriously. Mm-hmm. So in this sense, we are all the kind of theologians who can read and appreciate this book.
Right. The third audience that he talks about is those who are seeking to understand the Orthodox ethos and why it's different from other forms of Christianity, even though when we state our beliefs, they seem to be identical to other forms of Christianity. There's still a different feeling. And you can, if you're Orthodox, you know this. You feel the difference, mm-hmm. even though you can't necessarily put it into words.
Well, even just going back to the topic of theology, theology in an Orthodox sense is a reflection on the theophany of beauty. Mm-hmm. And then theophany is a word that we use all the time in Orthodoxy that other Christians know, but they don't necessarily use it the same way. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about theophany, we're talking about a very personal revelation of God himself. And then to say that theology is a reflection on the theophany of beauty, we're making a very explicit and profound statement that where we encounter the beautiful, we are encountering a personal revelation of God.
Yes. This is a perfect spot to share the quote that I really wanted to share in this episode, is that Dr. Patitsas is talking about St. Dionysius the Areopagite and how he describes the beautiful appearing of God over the face of the deep which kindled a fiery eros in non-being that inflamed it with the longing to transcend its formless state. Like, just take a minute to think about what that means. The picture that brings up, the non-being, he says the face of the deep, God's appearance over the face of the deep caused non-being to become, to go from being nothing to being something because of this beautiful revelation. It's a profound image.
It is a profound image, and it's also a profound understanding of that word eros.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that this book truly grew in me over the course of reading it, is an understanding of that word eros, of the desiderative power, as what some of the other fathers call it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are so predisposed to think of eros as something much smaller than it is. We think of it as romantic longing or sexual longing or desire of a small sort.
Yeah.
But the way that we're talking about it here, the Orthodox way, the way that Patitsas is going to open up for us, is understanding that whole power of eros that St. Dionysius is actually talking about.
And then the final audience that Patitsas is writing for is he's writing specifically to trauma sufferers. It might seem like kind of a strange audience given the first three. Those are more like general audiences, but trauma sufferers is a very specific kind of audience.
Right, because discussion of trauma is at the cutting edge of modern psychology. I mean, it's a buzzword right now.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people are talking about it. Some people in helpful ways. A lot of people are just trying to make money off of the phenomenon.
Right.
And so if we're just going to avoid adopting this modern cultural milieu about, trauma suffering, we really do need an Orthodox foundation in order to contribute in a helpful way to this conversation that everybody's having.
Mm-hmm.
The book really starts that process.
Right.
Because what does Dr. Patitsas say about therapy? He calls it modern therapy is truth first instead of beauty first.
Right.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So he talks about, well, we'll get into it definitely in some future episodes, like into more detail, but he talks about how a lot of times talk therapy, just reliving your trauma through talking about it, is bearing yourself like to the nakedness of the truth of what happened to you. And he says the truth first therapy is not healing anyone. It's doing more harm really than good. Trauma is already a force feeding from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Most therapy is only a gentler attempt at the same force feeding because you're just repeating what happened to you by saying it aloud again. Mm-hmm. And we don't need the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We need the tree of life.
Let me stop you right there, because that definition right there on page 6 of the introduction, that the force feeding of the knowledge of good and evil. The first time I read that, this is page 6 of the introduction, people, I set this book down and I sobbed for 10 minutes. Like I felt like somebody had finally described my own experience, a definition for my experience that worked, a fire hose of knowledge that I just couldn't handle on my own. And, a diagnosis is half the problem. Once you know, hey, you understand what's going on with me, chances are you're going to know how to help me, right? And that's where Dr. Patitsas goes through this whole book. He offers all these potential avenues of healing that are already there in the church.
Yeah. A lot of times, like the ideologies that we use to talk about our lives, like even in therapy and ethics and politics, whatever we're talking about, ideologies want to make us into gods by teaching us how to be in control.
Yeah, there's the tree of knowledge for you, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The secrets that will give you power over whatever it is that you're trying to, like whatever problem you're trying to solve. But in reality, we end up just becoming slaves to all the rationalizing hoops that we jump through. We're not free or in control at all. But rationalism is tempting because it promises, understanding, and once we understand, we can have power, we can control that Gnostic temptation, where if we just know the secrets.
Yep, we'll get it right. The outcome is guaranteed if you just know the right thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
But that leaves aside the important part, the relationship, right?
Yes. I mean, the internet is a perfect example of
Mm-hmm.
this, right? You have this pseudo community that preys on our passions, right? But we think if we know about all of the things and we can just go Google it, we can look it up and we'll have the answer, right? But knowledge is not what heals us.
Well, on that note, let's leave everybody with an idea and a question to ponder this week. So, can you pay attention to the places where you see beauty around you? Have you even noticed it before? And think about, how do you usually interact with the beauty that's around you? Do you take it for granted? Do you see it as a potential encounter with a personal God?
Yeah. And one more question to think about is how the definition of trauma as a force feeding from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, does that resonate with your own experience? Have you felt that yourself in your own life? And you can visit our Substack at orthodoxcm.substack.com, and you'll be able to comment on the podcast and start a conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, let us know what you think about these questions.
Yes. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.